Welcome to Transbiblical, a podcast where we talk about how gender variation is as ancient as stories about creation. In fact, that's the very first sentence in the new book, Transbiblical. My name is Katie E. Valentine. This is a limited series podcast, and I'm going to bring you authors and friends of the book to talk a lot about gender identities like transgender, non-binary, and so much more, all in conversation with the Bible and other ancient texts. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Transbiblical. This time we have a wonderful guest, Mack Griffith. Hey, Mack, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And Mack is a reader rather than one of the authors of Transbiblical, and a very soon-to-be Dr. Mack Griffith. So working on finishing up your PhD in New Testament. So sending you all of the everything.
Thank you.
Yes, as you're working on that. So just let's start off. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you are, what you do, that kind of thing.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Mack Griffith. I am finishing up a PhD in New Testament at actually MF Norwegian School of Theology, Religion, and Society. I work remotely there. I'm located in the Bay Area in California, and I work at one of the GTU schools. So I spend all of my time around theologians and Bible nerds, which brings me a lot of joy and really helps with the dissertation process.
Yes, and also brings you to reading Transbiblical. So well, tell us a little bit, like, what's your initial take on Transbiblical, and how does this fit into your work?
Yeah, I thought the book was super helpful. One thing I really appreciated is just like the wide diversity of approaches in the book. I think that it's really important that transbiblical studies doesn't become this sort of one thing. It doesn't pretend to be a monolith, just like trans people were not a monolith. So I think it's really important that the approaches we take to the Bible also are so diverse. And I think transbiblical has so many different approaches that I think is a really cool mosaic to look at the Bible through trans lenses and with trans perspectives in mind. I think that's really helpful. For my own work, Joy Layden's chapter on Beyond the Trans Cis Binary was incredibly helpful, because helping me find words for what I'm also trying to do, of trying to look at trans experiences a little broader and be able to make it a little bit more accessible for cis folks to not even just empathize, but be able to put themselves into an experience and realize that we're not some sort of unknowable aliens.
Right. Okay. So in your own work, so tell us a little bit about your scholarship, because when you told me what you're doing, it was really interesting, and we didn't get too into it because I wanted to be surprised when we talked.
Yeah, so I'm doing trans interpretations of recognition scenes in the Gospel of John. So I'm looking at a couple of different scenes and series of scenes, like The Man Born Blind and Doubting Thomas, and the arrest and trials of Jesus, and looking at these recognition scenes where Jesus is putting forth his identity and hoping that the people around him are going to recognize him with varying levels of success. I think it's really interesting and powerful for talking about trans stories, because up until, I think, with Doubting Thomas, Jesus's body doesn't come into it too much. It's his words, it's his actions, it's how
Lots
he's portraying
of words in
himself.
the Gospel of John.
Lots of words, which I love the Gospel of John for that reason. I love Jesus's monologues. I think they're fun. And the I am statements are just so powerful, I think, for talking about self-identification and being able to say who you are. And not everybody believes, but some people do. And I think that those are really powerful stories. So I'm really enjoying looking at the stories of Jesus through a trans lens, because also, as a former fundamentalist Baptist, being able to read Jesus through a trans lens is it feels like resistance in a really cathartic way.
So if you don't mind, tell us just a little bit about how you go from being fundamentalist Baptist to working on trans theories in the Gospel of John now.
Yeah.
In 30 seconds or less. No, take your time. But
yeah, so I grew up in a fundamentalist Baptist context and really loved it growing up there, was really good at it. learned a massive amount of the Bible in that. And I'm really thankful for that because it made me a Bible nerd forever. But when I was in high school and started to realize my own queer identity, that quickly became not really an option for me anymore. Not to mention the fact that I really liked to study the Bible in ways that aren't particularly encouraged in that context. Okay. So I had a lot of questions about the Bible, intellectual questions about the Bible and how it came to be, and taking the Bible literally and things like that. And then realizing my own queer identity, I didn't fit anymore. But I couldn't leave my faith. I couldn't leave Christianity entirely. That was too important to me. So I went looking for how I could stay. And I deconstructed a bunch of stuff and realized that now that I was no longer a fundamentalist, I could study the Bible. And I think it's kind of funny that I also didn't think that studying the Bible on a higher level was possible because I was socialized female. And then I was like, oh, wait a second. I don't believe that I have to be a man in order to study the Bible, but I am also that. So it's sort of an odd back and forth on that. But I like to say that people should be actually really relieved. They really wanted me to be straight, and in a way it kind of worked. It's just not really what they were going for.
Yeah, you had to deconstruct the Bible, gender, and like male hierarchy all within a short period of time.
Yeah. And then I went to Vanderbilt Divinity Schools, where I got my master's, and met my wife out there, and that was like biblical studies culture shock.
Okay.
I had already done a lot of deconstruction, but I had never been around religion, gender, and sexuality before. But I was in their Carpenter program and working with Amy Jo Levine and exploring gender in the Bible for the first time. And I went into it with this idea of like, I'm going to figure out how to defend trans identity using the King James version of the Bible.
Okay.
That was my initial plan. And then decided, no, I don't think I need to do that. Actually, I'm going to do something a lot more fun. And I instead ended up writing on a trans interpretation of John the Baptizer in Luke.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, that was a lot more fun.
Well, it may be just for listeners who are kind of unfamiliar, like what authors and the contributors to the book, and Mack as a newer scholar, it may be helpful just if we talked about, because I haven't talked about this in any of the other episodes, like what the heck we do, because a lot of people think we're like in a glorified Sunday school.
Yes,
all the time, or sort of like praying over the Bible all the time, which can happen. You might have prayers of desperation from time to time about like what does this mean. So yeah, and I think your experience is actually like pretty typical. A lot of people get to seminary and all of a sudden they're studying the Bible in a way they've never studied it before. So like in a nutshell, what do you do in an average day when you're writing and researching? What does that look like for you?
Bang my head against the wall a few times.
Right.
No, I think for me, what I do is I'm looking at these texts, and coming from my context, there was only one way to read texts, and it was as literal as you could possibly get it, with some notable exceptions, of course. And so now when I go to a text, when I'm doing trans biblical interpretations, I'm looking at it and I'm looking for angles to look at the text and to say, okay, so what's happening here in this story? What do I think in the case of my master's thesis, looking at the Luke story about John the Baptizer and trying to understand. I take more of like a narrative approach. So I'm looking at the story and the plot and what's happening here and how are the characters interacting, and then looking at it from, I think it's really important to do biblical studies as if people actually read the Bible and are impacted by it. And so for me, I then look, okay, so how are communities interpreting this text, and what is the outcomes of those interpretations? How have they caused harm? How have they been life-giving to communities? And is there something that maybe we've missed that we haven't seen before? Yeah.
Yeah. And so like my approach is somewhat similar. And so listeners, what we do is a lot of ancient language work. You're looking up stuff like the way things have been interpreted for the past 2000 years, which takes a lot of time. And then we're also looking at like, how is this relevant today?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a lot more than Sunday school. In fact, it like doesn't resemble Sunday school at all. Sunday school should be scared of us. Yeah.
No, it does not
In a
resemble
good way.
Sunday school. Sunday
Except the
school is
Sunday schools
great.
that I teach. But yeah.
I love Sunday school. I think Sunday school is great, but Sunday school is not the same.
Yeah, not the same. So that's great. Well, tell us a little bit about why, I think we've talked about it, but maybe just go into it a little more, like why trans lenses and the Bible and reading the Bible from transgender perspectives and so many different ways that we can do it. Why is that important for us now?
I mean, one, the obvious. There's so much false rhetoric and lies and terrible press and media out there about trans people right now. And sadly, a lot of it has its roots in biblical interpretations that have perpetuated these misinformation and saying that trans people are abominations and all of that terrible stuff. And as much as my friends sort of laugh and say that they don't really understand like why I'm still in Christianity in like a faith context plus being a scholar. But there's Vanessa Sheridan wrote in Crossing Over that it's so important that like we know that the Bible is our book too. And I think that becomes ever more important when the Bible gets weaponized so much against a group of people. And right now, doing trans interpretations feels like resistance to me. And so I think that that's really important, showing that I'm not going to give up my faith tradition. I'm not going to give up the Bible. I'm going to keep studying it, and say what you will, I'm here regardless. I think it's just so important right now. And it's really important to show that we're real people, that we belong in these spaces, and we're going to keep taking more space.
Yeah. So yeah, all of that resonates with me really, really strongly. And I'm curious, what of the chapters, did you find helpful for doing all of this kind of work and getting into there? And of course, we're going to be reading yours, yours really soon too, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, Joy Layden's chapter and Justin Tanis's chapter were, I think, the most helpful for me. One on more of my personal level. Justin Tanis's chapter was on the good Samaritan.
Yeah,
I said the good neighbor, which I mean also works, but
it works. Yeah,
it was so powerful, and I'd heard similar readings before, and the way that he describes the Samaritan as being this other, the most hated person we could come up with, is so powerful. And I particularly love at the end where he then flips it and says, okay, but from the other side, from the trans person perspective, what would it be like if on the side of the road the red hat wearing, American flag toting, Confederate flag toting person is there and shows kindness? And that part is, I think, for myself as a trans reader, even more important, I think, because I will never think of a trans woman as being, oh, this enemy, this other.
right.
But for me, being able to thinking about the ultra conservative MAGA Republican is a lot harder, especially because that's more of the context I came from. And so I think it's really important to continue to find ways to humanize all of us, is really important. And I think that reading does such a good job of that. Um,
Well, and
and then,
Justin
yeah,
reminded me too, like how we're so used to reading and hearing the Good Samaritan, like almost as a like little moral lesson for children, which is fine. But like, let's be nice to other people. But it's actually a very, very radical story. And
yes,
because it's so beloved, it has kind of lost its shine with that a little bit. This is gonna feel a little off track, but earlier today, I watched the new Netflix documentary. I think it's called like Quilt, and it's on men in a maximum security prison, I think in Missouri, who make quilts for foster children in their community. And it was just such the reminder that no one's everyone has a story that's bigger than the sum of their parts, right? And the Good Samaritan, for me, reading Justin's chapter on it was also helpful, just as the reminder that the person who I know is actually my enemy, they say they don't like me, right? Like it's not hard to identify. There's people who are actively, tell me all the time, you're leading people to hell. This is etc. But if I can see Christ in them, which is I am human and I can't always do it. But then I understand the Good Samaritan.
yeah, yeah, yep.
Yeah, and it's
And
not easy. Yeah,
no, definitely not. And I think that it's so. I think that you're right that the story is just so sort of ingrained in any of us who did go to Sunday school. We've heard the story a million times, and um, I always think it's interesting who we put our selves, whose shoes we put ourselves in.
yeah.
Um, and so it's interesting because I had never, I don't think ever, had thought to put myself in the shoes of the man on the side of the road. I had always been thinking of the three passersby and which one am
Hmm.
I being? But being the one on the side of the road and opening my eyes and this is who I see, that is also such a different way of reading that story and approaching that story and looking at the lessons from it.
Lovely. Well, and then I think you were going to give more shout out to Joy Ladens.
Yes,
Yeah.
such a fantastic chapter. The Soul of the Stranger is was such an important work when I was working on my master's thesis for me, um, and moving into my dissertation. So important, and so I was so excited when I saw she had a chapter in this book, and it did not disappoint. Fantastic. Um, I love the way she talks about reading things from a trans perspective and broadening what that means. Um, as for myself, I sometimes get frustrated when um, when I feel like things are a little too focused on medical transition for trans
Yeah.
people and bodies and that trans bodies look a specific way or all trans people do certain things to their bodies and things like that because we're all so different and some people don't or can't access that care. And so I think broadening it not only feels more um, inclusive, I think, to me for the whole trans community, talking about these moments of slippage between these roles and categories that are assigned to you and who you actually are.
Yeah.
One, I think that's so much more representative for me of the trans community. And when I describe that to a cis reader, because both of my dissertation advisors, neither of them are trans, and I spend most of my time explaining what I'm doing to cis folks, and
Mhm.
those are all things that those are experiences that they can resonate with more and understand more and be able to sort of put themselves in those experiences and in those shoes, which I think is so, like I said, important and helpful, especially right now, because I find that a lot of the people who have the hardest times understanding that I'm trans and trying to figure out what that means, I'm the first trans person they've ever met. And
Okay.
so they
That they
they
know of,
can't they yeah, that they know of
or
exactly.
they know of, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and so I try to be a person who's very open about my experiences, but it's always very hard for them if they can't imagine it. They can't put themselves in that position. They're like, I don't know what it would be like if I just woke up in the morning and thought I was supposed to be a woman. I was like, okay, but can you look in the mirror right now and think, well, and everyone else saw you as a man, would that be correct either? And they're like, oh, well, no. And like, yeah, that's the point.
Right.
Yeah, you've walked right into it. Good job. And so like that's so I think that her broader approach to reading from a trans perspective is so important. And I really appreciate the work that she describes doing in there of talking with trans and cis people, of learning to read text from this perspective. Because trans perspectives have so much to offer biblical texts and biblical interpretations. And I don't want it to just be this niche approach that a handful of people do in a side room at SBL. I want it to be a bigger what word am I even looking for? I don't know. I want more people to be aware of it, and I want people to be able to benefit from the experiences of all of our interpretive approaches, trans folks included.
And I'm thinking back to, what you were saying, that when you were first identifying as queer, and you couldn't, I don't remember your exact words, but you said something along the lines of you couldn't really leave. I don't know if it was your faith or Christianity or Jesus or whatever that
all
was.
Of the above.
Yeah. Okay. Behind for you. And although I'm not trans, I've had such the same experience where every time I've tried to leave, and I have tried, there's something that calls me back. Right? There's something that calls me back. And I finally, I think a lot of my clients actually begin as Christians, and by the time we end up working together, they're like, I'm not sure I can identify as Christian anymore, which is not my intent at all. But that's their journey, not my journey. But the reason they don't want to is not because of Jesus, not because they're too inclusive. It's because of the way other Christians act, and the co-opting that's happened. And so I know my response is always, well, I'm not letting someone else define my spirituality and how I approach the world. I don't know if that resonates with you, but
absolutely.
Yeah.
I get asked this pretty often of like, well, why are you still here? And one, I can't fully articulate why. Same thing of just there's something that won't let me go. I'm in this, and I'm apparently staying. And then, yeah, the fact of I'm not going to let someone take my Bible away from me, or tell me that universally they know for certain that the Bible condemns who I am.
Yeah, or that you're not in it.
Yeah, I love to just respond with and where did you find that? I'd love to talk about that with you. That's why I think that for me, I think the story that resonated the most with me as I was starting to find myself in the Bible again is the story of John the Baptist, because when he's born, he's not what they're expecting him to be, from his name to what he's going to do with his life. His whole community is scared, and they say, what will this child become? And I like to think that that's what everybody said when I came out at my fundamentalist church and decided to start studying the Bible professionally. I imagine a lot of people are like, what will this child become? And that feels like a really powerful trans moment for me in that story.
That's amazing. I haven't given much attention to John the Baptist, so I can't wait to read more. I'll have to get a hold of your master's thesis and see what I'm missing now. This is all so amazing. Well, so you're almost finished with doctoral work, and where can people find you? Like, what kinds of things are you doing? What's are you on socials? Do you want people to find you?
I can be found on socials. You'll find me under Mack Griffith on socials. Feel free to find me. As long as you're nice, be nice. But
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm working on a few different things. If you're also a Bible geek and will be at conferences, then you'll find me at the International SBL meeting. I'm presenting 2 papers there.
Oh, great.
And I will also be at SBL this coming year in November. 2 papers there as well. So I'll hopefully get some of those published soon in the future as well.
Nice. And what socials are your favorites, so we can make sure we provide links?
I'm much more of an Instagram person.
Okay,
I'm a Facebook and an Instagram person. So that
great.
is.
All right. Yes, we'll make sure we link to all those in the show notes. Well, is there anything that I didn't ask that I should have asked that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I'm just really appreciative of you guys doing this work. I know when I heard about this book, I don't even know, like two years ago, a year and a half
It's been a
ago.
long time coming.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
heard about it for the first time, and I've been like following everything on social media since I heard about it the first time. So I'm so excited
Oh,
it's finally here, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see what's coming next.
yeah. Thank you so much for that.
And
We're excited to see what comes is coming up too. And I've said before, this we began this formally in 2019, and if we were starting it formally now, it would be a really different book because there's so many more people that are now out and very visible. So it's really exciting. So I just can't wait to see the further. I can't wait for this book to become outdated.
Yes.
Right, with new research like that would be the ultimate compliment actually to the book.
Which
No,
is
I won't say outdated. It'll become a classic.
yes,
A
it's such a
classic,
weird thing
yes.
to write something you're like, I'm so excited when this is not the newest thing. We're moving
Yes.
so quickly. And it's
Yeah.
a weird way to look at it, but I agree. It's gonna be but it's gonna hold up too. So
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here and for reading and participating and doing your work. And I can't wait, and we'll make sure we get this out to everyone. So we'll see you next time.
great. Thank you so much.
I hope you're really loving this episode and getting to know Mac. If you love the podcast, of course, subscribe and leave us comments about what is resonating with you. There's lots of show notes below with links on where you can find Mac, on where you can listen, and different ways that you can support the podcast, including buying the book. Live your best life, and we will see you in the next episode.